profound kingdom of God truths. And so we look through a parable like a window and we see these truths. And this morning is like that. Now I want to start this morning a little bit differently than I normally do. I want to read you a story. Two reasons I want to read you the story. One is it's Father's Day, and it has a Father's Day component to it, at least on the back side of the story you'll hear toward the end of the message. But it also sets up the parable we're going to look at today. Now, I will tell you the title has nothing to do with dads in general, but the title of the parable is the parable of the rich fool. So dads, it's not about you necessarily, maybe, but it's not necessarily about you. But I want to read you the story because it'll set up the parable. It's a little lengthy, but it's a good story. It's written by James Bryan Smith, and it tells the story of a man named Ben Jacobs. He says, one summer I worked as an intern chaplain at a retirement center. Mostly I mingled during social times, but occasionally someone would request a visit from me. One day my supervisor handed me a slip that said, Ben Jacobs, room 116, requests a visit from a chaplain. She looked at me and said, good luck with this one, Jim. Her tone told me that she knew I was up for a difficult afternoon. I knocked on the door and a deep voice bellowed, come in, young man. Ben sat in his rocker with a shawl around his legs. He looked serious and important, and like one who would not be crossed. Good afternoon, Ben, I said, reaching out my hand to shake his. Sit down, son, he said, matter-of-factly, without shaking my hand. For the next half an hour, we talked about philosophy and world religions. After a while, he said, well, you must have much to do. I will let you go now. Good day. This time, he did shake my hand, and as I left the room, he said, would you please come back tomorrow? For the next 6 days, I went to room 116 and talked with Ben, and each day he opened up a little bit more, sharing more about his life in bits and pieces. Then on the 7th visit, I discovered Ben's main intention. He wanted someone to confess to. Not any one sin. Ben wanted to confess to having lived a bad life. Surprisingly, his life, according to many, was not really so bad. Some might even say he lived well. I made my first million by the time I was 25 years old. By the age of 45, I was the richest man in my state. Politicians wanted to be my friend. I lied, cheated, and stole from whomever I could. My motto was simple, take all you can from whoever you can. I amassed wealth and everyone was impressed with me. I had a lot of power in those days. I had 2,000 employees and all of them looked up to me or were afraid of me. Money was really all I cared about. I had 3 wives, all who left me either because of neglect or because they caught me in one of my affairs. I have one daughter who is now in her 40s, but she refuses to speak to me. He looked so grandfatherly in his cardigan sweater. He looked nothing like the kind of person who would have lived such an ambitious, selfish, and even sinful life. He went on, I suppose you could say that I ruined my life because today I have nothing really. Oh, I still have a lot of money. I still have more money than I could ever spend, but that brings me no joy. I sit here each day waiting to die. I have nothing but bad memories. I cared about no one in my life, and no one cares about me. You, young man, are all I have. How sad a story. Luke chapter 12 begins. Listen, Luke 12 begins this way. Under these circumstances, after so many thousands of people had gathered together that they were stepping on one another, he, Jesus, began saying to his disciples. Now get the picture. This verse is just to help us get the picture. Thousands of people are following Jesus. There's so many that they're stepping on each other, and Jesus is teaching them. And in this huge crowd, in the first 11 verses, he is teaching them that they are to fear God alone and to trust God for everything. And right in the middle of Jesus' teaching of them that they should fear God alone and trust God for everything, a man breaks in and just speaks up and asks a question of Jesus totally irrelevant to what's going on. Now picture that. Can you picture that? A huge crowd, Jesus teaching, and a guy just asked Jesus to do something for him that is totally irrelevant to what's going on. It's crazy. Now, I was thinking about it, and Josie and I took a class together many years ago at Houston Baptist University. In the off season, we'd go and take some classes. And we're in the class, we took one class together. It was a business kind of class. And I'll never forget, I felt so bad. He was a really good professor. He was a really good teacher. And one day, and this happened more than once, but one day in particular, I remember he was teaching, and a girl in the class just interrupted toward the end of the lecture that day, just interrupted and asked a question that had nothing to do with what he was talking about. In fact, her question had to do with, are you going to grade on the curve? I can't lose my academic scholarship. And I'm thinking to myself, how in the world did you get an academic scholarship? And I might have mumbled it out loud where it could be heard, because I remember Josie being really embarrassed and really angry with me but I mean, how silly. You would never do such a thing, would you? And I would never just change subjects like that. So picture this. Here's Jesus, the creator of the universe, teaching. And this guy just interrupts and asks a question. Here's the question. It's in verse 13. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." Imagine being so selfish, so self-centered, so greedy, if you will, that you interrupt Jesus in the middle of his teaching to ask him to settle a family dispute for you. You want your part of the inheritance that's coming to your family. Your older brother has it and won't share with you. Jesus sees through, he doesn't answer the guy's question. He sees through the problem. He sees the guy's problem as his possessions, and so Jesus, instead of dealing with the question, deals with the man's materialism. Here's Jesus' response. But Jesus said to him, "Man, who appointed me a judge or arbitrator over you?" Then he said to them, "Beware and be on your guard against every form of greed, for not even when one has an abundance does his life consist of his possessions." Now, could Jesus have handled the guy's situation if he chose to figure out his family deal? Without a doubt. I mean, Jesus could have handled it just like that if he wanted to. But that wasn't the issue. That wasn't the issue of the man who interrupted him. And Jesus wanted to get to the issue of the man's heart, because the man's heart was the problem. The thing that was important to him, so important to him that he interrupted Jesus in the middle of this conversation, and Jesus saw right through it. And here's what Jesus said: "Beware and be on your guard against every form of greed." Beware means be aware of. Be aware of greed. It is stealthy. It will sneak up on you, and you won't even know you've become greedy. Beware. And he says, be on your guard. We got to always be diligent. You know, the problem with greed is it just keeps coming at us. The idea of materialism and possessions just keeps coming at us all day, every day. Every time you turn on the television, every time you turn on the internet, you drive down the street and see billboards, it just keeps coming and keeps coming and keeps coming. Jesus says, beware and be on your guard. Covetousness is a combination of greed plus envy. It's the desire for more and more, often motivated by what somebody else has that we don't have. That's the picture. And he says, beware and be on your guard against every form of greed. Some translations say all kinds of greed. Greed comes in all kind of flavors, all kind of sizes, all kind of shapes. But it comes in two main forms. Greed comes into holding on too tightly to what we think we possess, holding on too tightly to our possessions, but it also comes in the form of grasping for more. So let me give us a way to help us remember these two forms. I want you to take your left hand and make a fist like this and hold it tightly. Come on, everybody, you can do this. Is not that hard. Come on. Not going to embarrass you, I promise, as far as you know. And just make a fist like this and squeeze, okay? Greed says, I'm going to hold on to my possessions, and nothing and no one's going to take my possessions. And I'm going to squeeze it tight. Doesn't matter what your need is, doesn't matter what somebody else's need is. These are mine. Greed says, these are my possessions. And by the way, as you get older and you've lived a while, you'll start to realize that holding on to possessions like this is trying to hold on to Jell-O like that. You ever squeeze Jell-O like that? If you haven't, just watch a child, give them some Jell-O and watch them, a little kid, and they will do that. And it's kind of hard to hold on. So greed says this, and take your other hand and leave it like this. Take your other hand and it's grabbing for more. Greed says, I got what I got. Oh, and I see what you got. And I see your car. I want a car like that. I see your house. I want a house like that. I see, you got a new cell phone. I want a cell phone like that. Or those shoes. Oh, wait, it's Father's Day. That's a Mother's Day. Anyway, that's a whole nother issue. But you get the point, right? It's holding on to what I got, and it's reaching for more. I have to have what you have. There was a Roman proverb that said that possessions were like drinking seawater. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. The more you want, the thirstier for possessions you become. Now, out of this background, Jesus tells this parable. Now we get to the parable. Listen to the parable. It speaks for itself. And Jesus told them a parable saying, here's the parable. The land of a rich man was very productive. And he began reasoning to himself, saying, what shall I do since I have no place to store my crops? His crops are so big, he doesn't have enough room to store them. Then he said, this is what I will do. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years to come. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your soul is required of you, and now who will own what you've prepared? So is the man who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. Now notice in this parable, Jesus never suggests that the farmer did anything unethical, anything that wasn't right. He didn't take advantage of any people. He doesn't criticize the man for being rich. Not at all. He gained this honestly through hard work. He doesn't criticize him for saving. The Bible never gets on us for saving even. Go, you know the story, it's such a beautiful story in Genesis 41 of Joseph and instructing Pharaoh and telling him we got to save these 7 years. I mean, saving's a good thing. We learned it in the Dave Ramsey stuff we did, right? It's a good thing. He doesn't criticize him for saving or for planning. Planning's a good thing. Those are all good things. You can't really fault him for anything that he did. He just had a very productive crop. But the farmer had to find a place to store it all. And you know what the farmer's problem was? He had a too much stuff problem. He had too much stuff. Now, none of us would have too much stuff, would we? The reality is most of us have a too much stuff problem. If you don't, we have 8 grandkids, the 9th on the way. 2 of them are granddaughters, and I will promise you, I don't know about the grandsons, but our granddaughters, they have a too much stuff problem. If you walk in their rooms, these little girls, there's so much stuff, you can't figure it all out. That's this guy. He had all the grain he needed, and he more than he ever expected. So he decided he's going to tear down his barns and build bigger barns. And most of us think, well, that's a really nice problem to have. More than he can spend, more than he needs, that's a good problem. Jesus is not condemning the man for working hard. He's not condemning the man for being successful. The problem is not the man's outward success. The problem was his heart. His heart was the problem. And that's what makes talking about possession so tricky and so difficult, because it's an issue of the heart. This parable is not a parable about necessarily being rich and successful. This guy happens to be, but the problem is we can take a parable like this and we can try to put a person in the parable like, for the older ones of us in here, Howard Hughes, for the younger ones, Elon Musk. And we put them in there thinking they have a too much stuff problem. They can't spend it all. This must be about them. But the danger of doing that is we say this parable isn't about us. It doesn't speak to you or me, but this parable speaks to every single one of us in this room. Whether we're old or young or rich or poor, this parable speaks to us because this parable is about a heart problem, not a stuff problem. Now, I do want you to notice one thing in this parable. In the parable, in verse 15, there is a word for life. It's the word Zoe or Zoe. Life is your biological life. But there's another word in here, I think it's in verse 23 and also in verse 19 for life. It's the word psyche, and it has to do with, it's translated soul, our soul. It is who we are. It's our identity, if you will. And what Jesus says in this parable is, look, your possessions don't make up your biological life, and your possessions don't make up your identity. It's not who you are. Your possessions will not buy you one more hour of time on this planet. And your possessions won't make who you are either. Neither of those things are fulfilled by what you have or what I have. If we try to make them do that, we'll end up empty and headed in the wrong direction. You know what this guy's problem was? His problem was, listen, he said, my crops, my barns, my grain, my goods, my soul, take your ease. I will, I will, I will, I will. He didn't recognize God as the owner. He was rich toward himself. And as Jesus said in the parable, he was not rich toward God. That was his problem. He was rich toward himself and not toward God. And here's the result. Here's what Jesus says. You fool. When God says to us, you fool, we need to pay attention. This very night your soul is required of you, and now who will own what you've prepared? So is the man who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. Now, why was this man a fool? He was a fool because he determined that a life of abundant earthly possessions can bring us pleasure and purpose and meaning and security and happiness. He was a fool because he left God out of the picture. Psalm 14:1 says, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. This man did not say out loud, there is no God. But this man demonstrated what was in his heart, that he was ignoring God by his response to his blessing. That's the picture. Verse 17, it says, and he began reasoning to himself. He didn't begin to seek God on the issue of the possessions. He began reasoning to himself. Where's God in that? God wasn't in the picture. He was called a fool because he believed a man's life consists in the abundance of his possessions. Possessions make us fools. Let me give you 3 ways possessions make us fools. Possessions make us fools when we don't recognize God owns it all. Everything you and I have is God's. Listen to Deuteronomy 8:18. But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth. A lot of people think that they're self-made men and have done well in business and they're successful, but I want you to know something. It's God that gave you the ability to do that in the first place, and God can take it just like that. Just like that. We're fools when we don't recognize that God owns it all. Secondly, we're fools when our possessions possess us. When our possessions possess us, we are fools. Matthew 6:21, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And if your treasure is in your possessions on this planet, your heart will be there as well, and you'll become a slave to those possessions because your heart will follow where your treasure is. And our possessions possess us, and when they do, then we're fools. And the third way they make us fools is when they make us forget the future. When possessions make us forget the future, they make us fools. When we forget that one day we're going to step into eternity. And that day isn't that far away. I want you to see a couple of coffee cups. This might be a good way to start the day. He who dies with the most toys wins. You've seen that before, right? A lot of people think that, but look at the next cup. This catches it better. He who dies with the most toys still dies. That's a reality. And when possessions make us forget the future, they make us fools. Jesus condemned this man because his priorities were out of whack, not because he was successful, not because he had stuff, but because he left God out of the picture. I want to give dads a statement. I'm not preaching to dads today necessarily. It kind of hits all of us. These truths hit all of us regardless. But dads, listen to this. I love this idea if we'll think this way. If we have an authentic confidence in what the future holds, you have an authentic confidence in what the future holds. It allows us to live and love with great freedom and joy today. If we look to the future and understand what in the future awaits us, that God is in control and Jesus is coming back and we're going to have eternity with him for those that know him, it allows us to live and love with great freedom today and not be possessed by our possessions because we know what's coming on the other side. Here's what I would say, and I guess I'm kind of talking to dads again. It's never too late. There's always hope because we have an incredible God of love. So this Father's Day, I know we beat dads up on Father's Day so much. I want to give you hope. I want you to listen to the rest of the story about Ben. Before the summer ended, during one of our many conversations, I ended up telling Ben that the only way to live was to follow Jesus. Ben did not offer much resistance to my statement. Jesus, he said, was brilliant, but he said it was too late for him. He had messed up his life and at the age of 75 was beyond redemption. I love this next line. I explained that redemption was God's favorite activity, regardless of age. During the rest of the summer, we met each day, and every session became more and more joyful. We read the Gospels together and talked about mercy and forgiveness and the opportunity to change. By the end of the summer, when it was time for me to leave, Ben offered me a very special gift, a rare copy of an old book he knew that I loved. Then he told me that he had decided to follow Jesus, had asked for forgiveness, and somehow in a strange way felt that God had forgiven him. He showed me a letter he had written to his daughter, asking for her forgiveness. The book was a wonderful gift, but the change I saw in his life over the course of a summer was the best gift of all. The last time I heard about Ben came when his daughter wrote to telling me that Ben had died at age 88. She said they had reconciled, and Ben had come to a saving faith. She said he spent his last years a changed man. Apparently, Ben told her about our summer sessions, and had asked her to pass on his gratitude. Ben did not live a radiant life, at least for the first 75 years, but he was changed and experienced a decade of devotion to God. According to his daughter, Ben died a radiant death. Hope of what Christ can do in a life. And we humble ourselves before him and trust him. I want you to look through the window of this parable. Can you look through the window of the parable? And do you see the guy that interrupted Jesus? Jesus could have answered that man's request, but he didn't. He had a bigger thing he wanted to do in that man's life. There's a whole lot of people that want to use Jesus to solve their problems. A lot of people want Jesus to solve their problems. But not everybody wants Jesus to change their hearts. Jesus wants to change your heart, not solve your problems. And when we humble ourselves before him and trust in him and what he did on our behalf, when he went to the cross for us and died in our place and shed his blood in our place, he did it so he would come and give us new life and change us from the inside out and give us new hearts, not solve our problems. Jesus came to solve your problems. And wherever you are today, if you humble yourself before him and trust in him, he will come and he will give you life just like he did to Ben when he was 75 years old. Whether you're 7 or 70, or 8 or 80, or 9 or 90, wherever you are, God will come and give you a new heart if you will trust in him.